You enjoy podcasts. We know because you're listening to one. Hi, I'm Jason Falls, the executive producer of the Marketing Podcast Network. We love podcasts too, so much so that in addition to providing you with the great episode you're listening to, we also help businesses, brands, and even individuals produce their podcasts. MPN Studios offers podcast consulting and production services to help you get you or your business its very own podcast. We've helped dozens of smart people, advertising agencies, and brands develop podcasts. All you do is record your content or interview. We take that and deliver a professionally produced audio or video episode complete with show notes, transcriptions, and even promotional clips to use on social media. And our monthly subscription prices are hard to beat. If you or your company are jonesing to have your own podcast to establish thought leadership, drive business leads, or just have fun talking about your business or topic of choice, we'd love to help. Learn more at marketingpodcasts.net/studio. That's marketingpodcasts.net/studio.
Hey, have you heard about Podcast On? This is a global podcast charity event where hosts dedicate one episode to a nonprofit they care about and release it together the same week. No fundraising, no fees, just powerful storytelling for good. Podcast On 2026 runs March 14th to March 20th. Join thousands of podcasters worldwide and use your voice for impact. It's free, it's simple, and it starts at podcasthon.org.
The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of Podcast On.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now. You call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Welcome to Your Radiant Spirit, a space for the conversations and colors that help you see yourself more clearly. I'm Heather Eck, an intuitive artist and guide, and I believe your soul speaks in the ways the mind can't always put into words, through color, energy, and the stories your body holds. This show is where we explore those messages. Through personal stories, deep conversations, and creative insight, we'll uncover what's been hidden, release what no longer serves, and begin to imagine what's possible when you live in full alignment with who you're meant to be. What you hear here is more than inspiration, it's an opening, a chance to feel the shift that could change everything. So take a deep breath, open your heart, and let's step into today's conversation. Hi friends, welcome back to Your Radiant Spirit. I'm so happy to be with you all today. A quick note before we dive into today's episode. I have started something new called the Color Healing Academy, and each month we will be meeting at 7 p.m. on the first Tuesday of each month to explore a specific color, its meaning, how it helps us, and how it can help us heal. You can get into this call for free if you're a member of the Color Healing Academy Facebook group. This is absolutely free to join, so pop on over to facebook.com/groups/Art by Heather Eck, and everyone who attends gets entered to win a spirit portrait with me. So hop on over, you're not going to want to miss this. Okay, today's guest is Bob Vetter, a cultural anthropologist and healer who has spent decades learning with Indigenous elders. He was adopted into Native families and mentored by the last Comanche medicine man, and now teaches a path called soul medicine, the journey from calling to healing practice. We talk about how trauma can become a source of power, how healing unfolds through story, and the dream that showed Bob how to bring back order from chaos. This is a really powerful but a fun episode, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So take a deep breath, open your heart, and let's dip into my conversation with Bob. Bob, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm so happy to connect with you.
Thank you, Heather. It's a pleasure to be here.
You have over 3 decades with Indigenous elders and healers, right? Can you take us back to how did you even get on that path of anthropology and healing?
Yeah, so from the time that I was a child, I was interested in different ways of looking at life and spirituality because I felt like the social and religious upbringing of my youth didn't really answer my questions. And I honestly felt that there was something missing and lacking in my own society that made me inclined to look at other things. So in seventh grade, back at a time where it wasn't like yoga now, where every street corner there's a yoga studio. I was in seventh grade and I was waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do yoga and meditation. And I was interested in Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism. And when it came time to go to college as an undergrad, I immediately gravitated to cultural anthropology because it was an academic excuse to look at alternative ways of looking at the world and how other people approach spirituality. Mm-hmm. So originally my area of interest was Asian cultures. And I went to India when I was in college and had planned on going on to grad school and doing field work, possibly in Bali or other parts of South Asia and Southeast Asia. But I ended up, through a curious twist of fate, we would need another podcast episode to explain how this happened. But I found myself at the University of Oklahoma, right in the middle of Indian country. And at the time, I knew absolutely nothing about Native Americans, but I needed to fulfill a course load that first semester. I had actually switched from a philosophy major to an anthropology major. And since that switch took place after the semester had begun, I couldn't re-enroll in other courses in the anthropology department. And they said, well, if you want to do field work, we could give you a full-time course load as independent study, and you can do ethnographic field work, which is where the researcher goes and investigates a community, trying to do it from what we call a participant observer point of view. Participant because you're participating in what goes on, at the same time that you try to keep a little bit of distance so that you can have an objective way of describing it. So my area of interest was where healing and spirituality intersects. So I decided, well, if I could meet a medicine man, that would fulfill my interest for this semester. Now, little did I know that interest would point me in a completely different direction and trajectory for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So essentially, to kind of cut to this part of the story, I met maybe about a month later, through another course of really curious twists of fate, I met a man named Oliver Patapony, who was the last medicine man of the Comanches. And he was so kind to me that he actually adopted me into his family. So he took me as a grandson.
Oh my gosh.
Here I was in Oklahoma. I didn't know a soul. I didn't know anybody, no less Native Americans. I didn't know anything about Native culture at all. But I bungled my way and blundered my way through a bunch of things until I finally met him and made every mistake that you possibly could in not knowing the difference in values and etiquette, So I made all these mistakes, but eventually I was able to meet this old man who shared with me a story that honestly changed my life. And it's the story, if you want to hear it, Heather, I'll tell you the story.
I do want to hear it. Yes, please.
Yeah. So again, I'm skipping through it, huge chunks of this story to get to this point. But I met with my advisor, and my advisor said, way after the fact, he should have told me this on the first day that I met him, but I told him what I was interested in. I told him I had met this medicine man and I was going to go back and meet him at his home. And he said, and I said, I want to learn about medicine. And he said, well, you shouldn't bring up that topic. And I was like, why not? And he said, well, that's a taboo subject. And you don't talk about something like that until you've had enough time to establish proper rapport. And I said, well, how long would that be? And he said, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year. And I was like, what am I going to do? This is my project. So he said, well, come up with some easy, low pressure things that you can talk about and do research about it and have that ready when you go. So I did all this research. I asked him, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, maybe traditional stories. So I read up on Comanche traditional stories and a whole bunch of other things. And I had these very easy questions on a yellow tablet of paper. And I had just a list of questions, and I was ready to ask him all these questions. So when we sat down, he asked me, well, what would you like to know? And I pulled out that first question about traditional stories, and he thought about it for a moment. He said, well, to tell you the truth, my wife's sister talks to somebody from the university about things like that. But from my point of view, those things are nothing but a bunch of fairy stories. He said, but if you want to know something real, I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you about my experience. And I can talk about that because it happened to me. And then he told me the story that I'm about to tell you that would, as I said, create a trajectory for my entire life.
Yeah.
He said, I didn't set out to be an Indian doctor. He was a medicine man, but he referred to himself as an Indian doctor. He said, I didn't set out to be a doctor, but I got sick. And I went into the hospital, and the doctors said that you've got cancer and it's terminal. And after they had done all of their tests and all of their procedures, the lead doctor came in and he said, we doctors, we had a series of meetings about your case, and we've decided that we've exhausted everything that we can, and you can stay here if you want in the hospital, and we can do everything that we can to ease your pain, but we've done everything for you that we know to do. Well, he said, no, I'll go home. And his son and his wife came in, and he said to them, take me out there to the hills and leave me out there. Now, what he was talking about was something called, well, anthropologists call it a vision quest. I really don't know any native people who really use that term, to tell you the truth. But he said, leave me out there on the hills because maybe I can take care of this the way that our old folks used to. But that's what he was referring to. And his wife, my grandma Esther, she said to him, she said, you're not man enough to take it. They're going to run you off. Now, a little backstory to explain what that means. He lived outside of the Wichita Mountains in southwest Oklahoma that are some of the oldest mountains in the country. They're way, way older than the Rockies. They've worn down to these boulders, piles of boulders, but they're sacred lands to the Kiowas and the Comanches and the Plains Apache people. And their belief is that there are a number of specific locales in the Wichita Mountains that are sacred sites where these spirits inhabit them. And when you go there with this purpose, they're going to test you. They're not going to automatically give you a gift. They're going to test how strong your resolve is. So before you go there, you set an intention that includes how long you're going to stay there. And if anything should happen where you change your mind and you leave without having fulfilled that, whatever it is that you were asking for, you're never going to get it. So when she said they're going to run you off, she meant these spirits are going to scare you when you're going to leave. And he said, well, the doctors gave up on me. I've got nothing to lose. So his son brought him there to this spot facing a mountain called Mount Scott, which is, I think it's the second tallest peak in the Wichita Mountains. And he went there on the night of a new moon with nothing but a sheet to cover himself up, an eagle feather, some tobacco, and 4 corn shucks or corn husks to roll prayer smokes. And he went to that place, and the way that he explained it to me was that nothing happened throughout the entire day. Nothing happened that night, but something did happen just before morning. So he said he was scared and he couldn't fall asleep all night. So he was just sitting up waiting to see what would happen. And toward morning, he said that when he looked off in the distance, that he could see a flickering of light, and that it was like a flame would go on and then it would go out, and then it would go on and then it would go out. And the flame was moving toward him. And as it got closer, he could make out the outline of a form, and he realized that the flame was when this being exhaled. Every time it exhaled, fire came out of its mouth. And he called this being, this entity, the visitor. And he said that that visitor was coming toward me, and I realized that he was coming after me. And he said, as he got closer and closer, I got more and more scared to where I was like, he said I was a pathetic man. He said I was like, if you take a fish and pull him out on dry land, that's the way I was.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, that visitor got right up in front of me and shot me with the fire. And he said, when I got hit by that fire, everything stopped. My breathing stopped. My heart stopped. I was unable to speak or move. But then finally, he said, when the visitor spoke, everything came back. All of a sudden, my heart started beating again, and I could breathe again. And he said, the visitor asked me, he said, son, what are you doing here? And Grandpa Chief said, well, I'm sick. And the visitor said, there's nothing the matter with you. You're going to be all right. But they sent me to take care of a man who's real bad off. And then the visitor, he started to take off. But he turned around one last time and he looked at Grandpa Chief and he said, son, did you know that this world stops? That this whole world stops for just a moment right before morning. And that's the time when things like me can enter into this world. And then the visitor took off to the west. And that was the last time that Grandpa Chief saw the visitor. But it was also the last time that he had any of the symptoms connected with cancer. So a little while later, his son came running up to him and he said, Dad, how did you make it through the night last night? He said, it was so cold out last night, and this is all you had was a sheet. Grandpa Chief said, well, where I was at, it was like springtime. And everywhere that he had, except for where he had been, he came down off this little rise facing the mountain. Everywhere else, there was a hard frost on the ground, except for where he had been. Well, he went back home, never went back to the doctor, never went back to the hospital. And it turned out that he was fine. But that doesn't explain how he became a medicine man.
Right.
So he was walking, and he lived out in the country outside of a little town called Apache, Oklahoma. And he had gone into the town, and there was a Comanche woman walking on the other side of the street. And she came over to him, and he said she was an older medicine woman. And she said, son, what happened to you? And he said, nothing. And she said, no, there's something different about you, I can tell. And he didn't want to talk about it, so he said, nothing. And she said, no. I know that there's something different about you, something changed. Now, what happened? Well, finally, he told her the story that I told you. And she said, well, you're good for something. And right now, you may not know what that is, but sometime soon, you're going to find out. So now this was the part that's a little shaky and a little bit hard for me to piece together, because these elders that I got to know when I was a young man, they were from like another time, another way of relating and explaining things. So this part I'm kind of piecing together from many different conversations. But he started to think about the things that he had watched as a little boy, because there were these medicine men back when he was a boy. Now you figure he was born in the last couple of years. We don't even know exactly when he was born, but late 1890s. And he's thinking back to when he was a little boy, watching the old men who were elders then. So these are guys that were born probably in the early 1800s. So a completely different time and place. And they used to have they were kind of like matches, I guess you could say. In the anthropological literature, anthropologists talk about this as being like a contest to see who had more power. I mean, I don't really look at it that way. The way that I look at it is when they would perform these things in front of a group of people, they would expand everybody's understanding of what is possible in the universe. So they would do things, and as a little boy, he would see them sometimes walk through coals, sometimes put coals in their mouth, sometimes pick up the coal and use it, or blow fire. There were lots of different things that these old men would do. One old man was able to stomp the ground in order to make a woman stop hemorrhaging blood. And by the fourth time that he stomped the ground with his foot, it stopped the bleeding. So, he had all of these things in the back of his mind that he was remembering now, even though he was an older man by then. And meanwhile, word had gotten out to people around there about what he had gone through. And they just automatically assumed that meant that he was now destined to be a healer. So he's piecing all of this together, I guess you could say intuitively, because he didn't have a teacher to guide him. But he realized that he had this power, because what he said to me was, that visitor shot me with fire, and you've got to fight fire with fire. So his way of doctoring was to pick up a red hot coal out of a fire and put it in his mouth. And he said that then that would activate the power in him that allowed him to take that person's flesh and move it back to the way that it was supposed to be. Because he said that once the heat, the fire had been activated in him again, or reactivated, that the person became like wet cement in his hands. Like he said that when you pour cement, it's wet and it can be moved and shaped the way that you want it. But after you leave it for a while and it sets, it stays that way. And he said that's the way human flesh is as well. And he became a medicine man, known among his people, also known to some degree among non-native people as well. And he dedicated the remainder of his life to doctoring people who needed his help. But that story, for me, became the inspiration for me in wanting to go down the road of a healer. To know that what has held you back and what has been your difficulty, your trauma, your hardship, your illness of whatever kind, body, mind, spirit, emotions, whatever it is, becomes your source of strength in helping out others in the world. That formula became the thing that drove me and drove my interest in non-Western cultures and other alternative ways of healing, which would eventually take me down a number of different roads. But that the story itself became the inspiration for me.
And you said that story changed your life. So you decided after you heard that, what did you do? You said, I want to be a healer. Do you think your 7th grade self received that calling at that young age?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I didn't understand it that way at the time. And, so much of it was like a download that I say download, because everybody understands what a download is, that momentary electronic transfer of information that then takes this time to unpack. And that's the way that it was for me. I didn't know what it meant at the time, but it was a calling, because my hunger had been a spiritual one. But honestly, because of my own traumas, because of my family background, I had lived a life of isolation. I was an only child raised by my grandmother, who was working most of the time, with no other family. I mean, my mother lived in another town. So it was me and my grandmother. She was gone most of the time. So I was on my own. And I had a model of spirituality at first that was, I thought spirituality is what happens when you're all by yourself.
Oh, wow.
And it was through this adoption into this family. I was later adopted into a Kiowa family, into a Cheyenne family, and into a Caddo family, where all of a sudden I developed dozens, hundreds of relatives, you know? So my own healing from my traumas began with the social side of spirituality and healing. And then eventually I came to study something called Curanderismo. Mesoamerican anthropologists would call it Mesoamerican folk healing practices.
Okay.
And learning from teachers here in the United States, as well as going to Mexico. And a lot of what I came to use came out of Curanderismo. But then I studied things like sound healing, medical qigong, various forms of energy healing, lots of other practices. But it was that story that I told you that led me down that road of decades and decades of learning everything that I could to eventually create something that I think is unique. And that's maybe the next chunk of this story to share.
Yeah, I mean, especially because you're bridging two completely different worlds or ways of being, Western culture and Indigenous culture. So how did you bridge those two together and honor those sacred practices while bringing in all of these other modalities, I would say, to do the work you're doing now?
Yeah, so that was honestly, that led me to a crisis at one point.
Okay, yeah.
It did, because I had spent all this time studying these different things. I had learned all about Curanderismo, but I'm like, well, I'm not Mexican, I didn't grow up in that culture, and
Hmm.
this system, Reiki, and all these different things. So what do I do with it? And to be perfectly honest with you, I found myself in an all-night ceremony
Mm,
where I prayed for an answer to that question. I prayed for an answer for it fervently because I didn't know what to do with it. I knew all of this stuff, but I didn't know how to use it in a way that would be most effective and genuine and be authentic.
right.
And I said, what is the answer? And again, I received a download that took me a while to unpack, but I was told which tools to use, and I was told how to put it together. And as it turned out, Curanderismo became this perfect model of structure, of how to take all of the teachings and all of the ideas and all of the techniques and put them into something that was, in a way, performative. So
Hmm.
that each session would have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in June, I had a dream vision that I'll share with you that really, I think, explains this.
Just this past June, you
This
did?
past June.
Okay.
Because I was looking for a metaphor. I'm always looking for ways to take something that's complicated and make it simple. And I like to tell everybody, I think it's because I'm simple-minded. So I'm always looking for how do I take something that's really complicated and make it simple so that anybody can understand it through stories and through metaphor. And this was the dream vision. In the dream vision, I was shown 24 roses. There was 12 white roses and 12 red roses. And in my field of vision, on the left-hand side, there were white roses that had been organized into a geometric pattern, kind of an interlocking pattern of the stems and the white part of the rose. It's a little hard to explain, but it's an interlocking pattern
Okay.
that I can now see in my mind's eye. And on the right-hand side in my field of vision were the red roses that were just kind of scattered, just chaotically dumped. And what I was told was, if you look on the left, that order is the pattern of healing and balance. Your patient is represented by the red roses on the right. So your job is to take the red roses and reconfigure them so that they resemble the order of the roses on the left.
Mm.
And that's what I think of this work in healing as doing, as taking the chaos of the life that we experience and suffering and repatterning it, reorganizing it to bring a person into balance. Now, that doesn't always equate to being cured of a sickness. You know, you could be healed and not cured. You could be cured and not healed. You could be healed and cured, or you could be neither healed nor cured.
Uh-huh.
You know, but healing, in my way of what I've come to understand it, healing is our movement as an individual soul that is here for a purpose in moving from order when we're born, hopefully, to the chaos that we experience through trauma and through something that we call susto or soul fright in Curanderismo,
Oh, wow.
and moving back toward order again. It is that movement back toward order. And I say toward order because we're always moving in that way. That is the nature of the reason of why we're here, and it is healing. So I've come to view healing in a much wider sense, that it is the fulfillment of our evolutionary potential. Now, for most people, that healing is the path that they are going on for him or herself. But for a person who has this calling to be a healer, it's simultaneously working on my own healing and doing the best that I can to facilitate it for other people at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So I got to go back to your vision.
Okay.
And you probably saw my face go, I had a moment of like realization. So I'm learning biblical Hebrew at the moment because I'm deep in Bible study, and I wanted to understand the Bible from the text perspective, not from a religious dogma perspective. But what does it say? And so when you said that the white roses were on the left and the red roses were on the right, it made me think we read Hebrew from right to left.
Interesting. Yeah.
And because you would think, right, like here's the order, here's the chaos, and you would think that would go from left to right, but actually it's going from right to left. And then what made me kind of chuckle was that the root chakra is red and the crown chakra is white. And so if you take your roses and you turn them, you have the root and the crown. And
I never
so
thought of that connection. That's a beautiful connection.
isn't that fascinating? So you think about like the anatomy of the spirit. If you've ever read Carolyn Meese, her work is really fascinating. She talks about how an idea comes in through the crown because that you're receiving your divine inspiration or your download, and it processes through every energy center until it can be born into the physical, into the root, which is red.
Beautiful.
So I just loved what you said about you come into the world in order, because that's the first law of the universe, right? Is order. And
Right.
then you experience your sustas, or that soul tumult, and then you go back to order again. So that just made me go, wow, it's all connected. It's all connected.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
So if you don't mind, I'll share with you a little bit about what I do with all of this with people today.
Please.
Yes.
Yes. Love
So
it.
I was, I thought about how much time it took in my life, and we're talking decades for me to make something out of all of this disparate stuff in figuring out what it meant. And then I've gone on this journey of working with students and apprentices and teaching people. And I thought to myself one day, of all the people that I've known who have been my teachers, I felt like each one of them gave me some piece of this solution to this giant crossword puzzle. If I could find somebody who could take me from the very beginning of that journey where I felt the calling to where I actually began working one-on-one with people and healing them, what would that be like? And it made me like do kind of a reverse engineering of everything that I had learned. And I put together something that I call soul medicine,
Mm.
the journey from calling to healing practice, as a way to guide people in this process so that they could take all of the things that they've already learned, combine that with some simple techniques that I teach, plus their own unique experience, their soul's journey, the things that have held them back in this lifetime that they have been able to heal. So it's these three elements combined to create this unique alchemy so that a person could come out the other end and actually begin work one-on-one. So that's what has, and this is relatively recent. I mean, I only put that together a little over a year ago, and I've finished the first cohort and about to start my second cohort in teaching this new, for me, new system.
And this is the 4 stages that are in this book that you've
Yes.
written? Okay.
Oh, well,
Or
actually,
in your program.
my book is on another topic. Working on a book right now about these 4 pillars
Okay.
that we use to go into a healing practice. But taking those things, my own unique experience, that my soul as an individual, plus the things that I've learned along the way, if I've studied different modalities of healing, plus this container, this very basic container in order to create something new.
Oh, I love that. If somebody's listening and they are feeling this call to healing, but they don't quite know where to start, what's the first thing you encourage them to do?
The first thing to do is to examine the calling,
Okay.
to look inside and understand what is the calling leading me toward? Why do I feel this burning desire to heal others? And then the next step is to say, how is my own healing leading me in a particular direction? How did the crises, the traumas of my life set me up for something else? How did they lead me to understand others in a particular way, even to who the people are that I'm ultimately going to work with? That it all has a purpose, it all has a meaning, that I have to get to a certain point in my life in order to see these dots, in order to connect the dots. Now, there are a lot of free resources that people can find on my website, including some ideas about how to determine whether I'm supposed to be a healer or not. So I'm happy to make that available to your listeners today.
Thank
So,
you. I think that would be amazing.
yeah, so just come to my website. It's www.bobvetter.com. So BOBVETTER.com. And there's all kinds of podcast episodes, there's blogs, there's free resources, lots of stuff there to help you along the way to find out if you are meant to be a healer. And then if things go in that direction and you want to join me for an upcoming cohort of soul healing, join me for that journey.
Amazing. I saw that on your Instagram. You did a great job on your reels, so I'll share all that information in the show notes too. But I really appreciate you sharing how, well, a couple of things, I think. Your story starts as, in 7th grade, feeling so drawn to these different practices and with such an innate curiosity about the world and world cultures, and that led you down such an interesting path that when you were able to live with and study with incredible healers and elders. And so I always say, my spiritual teacher said this to me, and I always bring it up, that your gifts show up when you're young. that it sounds like you received that calling, you know, when you were 12, 13 years old. And maybe it wasn't a complete linear path, but you came back around to it. And that's where your healing started. And now even to hear you say, it's really reassuring to me to hear you say, I just had a dream in June that's informing the place where I am now. Because I think a lot of us sometimes want everything all at once. Give me the download, give me everything. I got to know how to do everything right now.
It would be nice if things were that simple, wouldn't it?
Myself included, right? But I think even in the time that I've been doing the work that I'm doing, I feel like I pray for God, just shine the light on the next step I'm supposed to take. Just give me the next step because I think we are given what we're prepared for now. And so it sounds like you've been prepared for this new program, Soul Medicine, Journey from Calling to Healing Practice. And I'm sure you're going to receive even more information as your life continues on. You'll receive even more and more and more. So I think that's really beautiful and wonderful, and it just goes to show that we're never done learning. We're always getting what we need in order to continue down our path.
Well, I want to kind of spotlight just for a quick second what you just said about asking God to shine a light just on the next step, and say what a beautiful way that is to look at it, instead of assuming that I have to get to quote unquote the goal. To see the next step clearly is to allow this entire journey to unfold in an organic way, and maybe in the way that is most closely connected with my soul purpose in being in this world.
Mm-hmm. And our own healing, right? Because we are helping to usher others through their path of healing, but we have to do our own healing ourselves too. And so we may not be able to offer something to somebody if we are not ourselves healed from whatever it is that we need to go through too. So I just love your that storytelling is so central to your work, and you're a beautiful storyteller. And I could sit and listen to you for hours.
Maybe another podcast has that.
Another episode. But I think what's really interesting is I've been talking to some of my friends recently about how much content there is out there and how much we consume all the time from different sources and different places, the television, your phone, all the things. And that I don't think our nervous systems were meant to take in all that information, but we used to live in community. We used to sit around a fire and tell stories and talk and take care of our community and learn from each other that way. And that feels like listening to you speak made me think about that way of living that is so vastly different than the way that we live today.
Yeah, the other thing about it is when you hear stories and you hear them a number of times, it's not like a boring rerun of a TV show.
True.
It's you hear it in a different way every single time. And it makes me think about like, for example, my Kiowa relatives would talk about how in the old days that an elder would enter into the teepee and he would sit down and there's fire burning, and imagine that you got a number of children there who are like sleepy and getting ready to go to bed, and the elder sits down and he starts telling you a story, and from time to time he pauses in the middle of the story and he says, "Ha," and if you're awake you respond back, "Ha." It just means yes, but it's this back and forth way for the storyteller to know that somebody is still listening.
Mm-hmm.
And when he doesn't hear "ha" in response, he knows that it's time to walk out of the teepee. And I just think, wow, what a beautiful way that is for us to hear these stories over the course of a lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
them over and over again. And every time we hear it, we get something new from it. And that's what's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful about story.
Absolutely.
Stories are a way of making the possibility of transformation palpable, for me to understand that something changed in that story and something can change in me.
Mm-hmm. And I love that too, because I think, like you said, our stories are healing. when we share our stories with others, they're able to learn from it. And I think we learn something about ourselves when we're courageous enough to share our stories with people too. And we're meant to reach our hands back and pull people along with us and to help them see that healing is possible through that as
And
well.
story is medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that too. Like I always talk about art is healing, music is healing, writing is healing, story is medicine. All these things are so healing for us because they rely on collaboration, and they rely on an exchange like communion. Almost, you're communing with somebody in a spiritual way. And I think that there's so much healing in that for people if they lean more into that way of being instead of the things we can get caught up in, influencers and TikTok and all the things.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the one hand, Heather, I'm going to say the modern technology is what allows you and me to have this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So there's a way that it can bring people together. Unfortunately, there's a way that it can divide people as well. So we have to be discerning, I think. And if we really are in a healing path, we can use these as tools to bring us together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so happy that it brought us together today.
And me as well. Thank you so much for having me, Heather.
Thank you so much for being here. I will share all of your information in the show notes so that our listeners can find you and hopefully get to work with you someday. And I hope to bring you back because I know that there's so much more of your story that I personally would love to hear. I'm sure the listeners would as well.
Thank you. I'd be happy to.
Thank you so much for listening today. I loved that conversation with Bob, and I know there's so much more to his story that I hope to explore with him again someday soon. If these conversations opened up something in you, here are a couple of ways to go deeper in your work. You can work with me one-on-one through a spirit portrait or a therapeutic art journey where color and creativity become your map for healing. Or join us live at the Color Healing Academy on December 2nd for an evening of color, art, and gentle transformation. And since you made it to the end, here's a little love note from me. If you leave a quick review of Your Radiant Spirit on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, screenshot it and send it to me. I'll pick one listener to receive a free color mini reading as a thank you for supporting the show. You'll find all the links and details for everything we talked about in the show notes. And until next time, my friends, keep noticing the colors, the moments, and the quiet nudges. They're all guiding you home. Thank you for joining me today on Your Radiant Spirit. Every conversation here is an invitation to go beyond the surface, to listen to what your soul has been whispering, and to step into the life you've been longing for. If you're ready to go deeper, to work in a way that's personal, creative, and profoundly transformative, you'll find ways to connect with me in the show notes. Whether it's through art, a guided session, or a fully immersive journey, you'll discover a space where your truth is seen and your next chapter begins. If this episode spoke to you, it would mean the world if you shared it with a friend, left a review, or subscribed so more people can discover the conversations we have here. Until next time, my friend, keep noticing the colors, the moments, and the nudges. They're all leading you home. And for now, take a breath, hold on to what resonated, and carry it with you into the rest of your day. Thanks for listening.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.